There's a funny story that I think we should start with. That is something that happened on the film set. Stanley liked carrying a walkie-talkie because he liked to hear what you know, as witnessed, you see, he wanted to be a part of every aspect of the filmmaking. So why shouldn't he have a walkie-talkie and know what the assistant directors were saying and what kind of movements were happening? And we broke for lunch, and the assistant director, Terry Needham, got a call from Stanley. And Stanley asked Terry to come over here. And Terry said, okay, but where's over here? And I'm going to let Leon tell the rest of the story. No, go on. No. All right. He said, I'm over here, and Terry Needham had to try. He said, come out of the tent where we were having lunch, and he came out and he says, now just walk over toward this building. He didn't want to say on the radio that he was stuck in the porta potty. He couldn't get the door open, and Terry needed, but he didn't want to say it over. So it's just a little window into who Stanley, like a different part of Stanley Kubrick that's not covered in the documentary.
Yeah, he could be shy.
Now, please, Leon, tell the story about, remember when he said he was going through and taking an inventory of everything that was inside the stables? And as he was going through, Stanley had sent him to go collect something, and he found a box that said, I think you said it said Pie Fight, right. Dr. Strangelove. And you want to tell the rest of that story?
Well, I was actually going through, boxes this big, this tall, of all outtakes from, Cloak, Orange, Barry Lyndon, Shining, because we were going to burn them. And I suddenly came across this tin, and it said, Dr. Strangelove, Dr. Strangelove Pie Fight. And I knew that it had been cut from the original release because of the assassination of JFK, because they thought it would be disrespectful. So I took it to Stanley, and I said, look what I found. And so we looked at it on a projector on the screen, and Stanley stood there saying, oh my God. And I thought, something, God was good to you, because he actually, that Pie Fight was nothing. It was such a terrible way to end what had been a fine film. It was slapstick, it was crazy. And so we put it in the tin. Stanley walked up with it, under his arm, and I don't think it was ever seen again. They had one print at the British Film Institute, but that was all.
Tony, what gave you the idea to make this documentary about Leon Vitali?
Leon? No. Well, we met because I was working on a Kubrick documentary about his creative process, and of course Leon was a must on the list because I knew that he spent years and he was the closest when it came to creativity with Kubrick. So I tracked him down and went to Culver City and met him, and I just couldn't believe that this really film history and everything about cinema was sitting right there in that house, Leon himself. And I was just struck by his story.
Was it your intention to make a documentary about
Kubrick?
About Kubrick?
Yeah. But then when I heard his story, I was just like, this is the worst nightmare for a filmmaker, that when you're really super independent, you have to pick up another documentary. Can't even finish one. But I just, and then I went back and I told my producer and partner, Elizabeth Yaffe, who's here, and without her we won't be here. She's back there. So I said, this is the most amazing story. I have to do a documentary about this guy. And then I was like, but I'm not sure if I really want to take on another project. But then I remember she said to me, you're going to regret it if you don't do it. And so I went back and I asked him, and he said no. And I realized that Leon is just not used to talking about himself. he can talk about Kubrick till, you know, forever. But so it was quite difficult. The first month it was horrible because he was, you know, how he imitates Danny Lloyd in The Shining. He was literally the entire time just sitting like that. And one word would come out, just not interested, until we broke the ice. And we broke the ice by volunteering to organize the heaps of, literally, I think he lives in an exhibit in his house. So much stuff, and I volunteered to, if we organize it, he would look at the stuff, he would remember. And we did that, and he started to really like, he was shocked about what he did. Because he would open stuff and he'd go, oh my God, I don't believe I've done this and I've done that. And we just kept going. 3 years.
Hello? You had to organize all of Leon's things, like Leon organizing Stanley's things.
Yeah. You know, it is interesting that you said that, because it got to a point, because it was 3.5 years. And it got really hard at one point. But then I realized, you know, you got to walk the walk, talk the talk. And this man spent his whole life serving Stanley, and I felt like I'm of service to Leon now. And really, I had to just strive to kind of get to that, because you don't meet people like that. You really don't.
I'm glad you mentioned independent film, because I know there's a lot of filmmakers in the audience tonight. One of the things that people would ask about, because they imagine the enormity of Stanley Kubrick's legend, is that he was a filmmaker who must have had hundreds of people that were working for him, and it was quite the contrary. I mean, Leon really did wear 100 different hats, because when you went to work, there was sometimes when we were filming on the stage, maybe it felt like 15 people working on the film. So it's what I feel is that Stanley Kubrick created an environment for him to be able to keep production costs down to the minimum, so that he could have the ability to work for an extended period of time, to do as many takes as were necessary. But in fact, he was probably the most independent filmmaker I've ever worked with.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's absolutely true. You know, the one, you could go on to understand this set, particularly Full Metal Jacket, and the crew was probably the size of a...
It's Stanley calling.
No, he's telling you, don't tell that story.
It's all right. They're no bigger than a well-crewed student film. You know, I mean, in Full Metal Jacket we had one spark, one electrician. That was it. Because we shot so much of it in natural light. And any light we did have, you know, it was a bank of lights in the barracks, for instance, that just went up and down on a dimmer. And so he was always conscious about getting every single dollar on the screen. It was the most important thing to him.
That electrician, that one Sparky that we had working on the film, that he had to, because of the union Seamus, to turn the lights on. It was a union thing, so he'd come in and turn the lights on, and then Stanley tell him to fuck off to his house because there was some wiring problem in the house. He had to pay him for the day, so go wire my house. There's a story about Dorian Harewood that I'd like to hear, to collaborate on this. That Dorian Harewood's a wonderful actor. He was playing 8-Ball in the film. And all of our contracts, we were originally contracted for about 6 months, I think it was, and the contracts were coming to an end, and so they wanted to renegotiate the contracts, which wasn't a renegotiation, it was just a re-upping, you know, to continue the contracts for a period of time. And Dorian came to Stanley and said, I want to renegotiate, I want more money. And Stanley couldn't believe the audacity of this young guy. He's like, you're working for Stanley Kubrick and you're asking me to pay you more money? He said, well, yeah, I gotta go back to Los Angeles. I have a singing career, I have an acting career, there's other jobs. and if you want me to stay here, you're going to have to pay for it. And Stanley couldn't believe it, and I remember him stumbling around for hours, furious, with that crazy look on his face. And then he turned and he said, "I'm going to kill him." and I mean, I really thought, oh fuck, Stanley's going to commit murder. He's going to kill Dorian Harewood. And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I'm going to kill him." And I think that, you remember when it's Dorian, he gets shot in the foot, he gets shot all over the body. And it was because however number of days were left on Dorian Harewood's contract, Stanley was, they put the bullet hits, he'd get hit, and it was really cold. You see Stanley wearing that hat and 2 coats. We were wearing Vietnam khakis. It was freezing cold. It was snowing in London, and we were dressed up for North Vietnam. And he killed him for as many days left that he had on the contract. Yeah, about 5 days, lying on the cold earth with bullet hits. And now we have to do it again, put more bullet hits on it. And they were full loads, full of, I mean, exploding blood and everything. Is that true? Now, tell me, is that true?
Yeah. That was also when the story that you cut happened.
Yeah, I cut a scene that, well, I don't know, I mean, I cut a lot of stuff out because, again, hour and a half, but yeah, you should tell that story. Maybe, well, if it's appropriate. Maybe it's appropriate in England, but not here.
I don't know.
Please do.
Too strong a word coming out. But I was there very early on the set one morning, and Stanley called me into his office caravan. And he...
Say what we call it in America, Winnebago.
Winnebago, yeah, Winnebago. So, and in fact, they used to confuse Stanley because he always used to say, "Well, are the actors coming in the Winnie bus?" And we said, "You mean the mini bus?" And he said, "Oh, right." Anyway, he said to me, he said, "This piece of paper, all the extras signed, what does in perpetuity mean?" And I said, "What do you mean forever?" And he said, "Are you sure? You really sure?" And I said, "Yeah, it means in forever." I had to sign a contract for Barry Lyndon where it said I would never get any residuals, you know, now or in perpetuity. So I knew exactly what it meant. He said, no, I want you to talk to Jan and get him to ask the Warner legal department." And so I said, "Okay, I'll phone him." He said, "No. You go to his office, you walk in, and you give him the piece of paper, and you ask him, what does in perpetuity mean? And then ask him to ring Rick Sennett, who was the lawyer at Warner Brothers." And the thing was, Jan Harden's office was an hour and a half away back from where I'd come, where I lived, to get to work in the first place. So I drove all the way back there, and I went to Jan's office, and he made a phone call. And I drove back to the set, and they were shooting Dorian being shot. And he saw me coming from about 30 yards away, and just, you know, he hadn't even finished the take, and he suddenly looked and saw me coming and said, "Did you tell Jan?" And I said, "Yeah." "And what did he say?" I said, "We said in perpetuity what I said, you know." He said, "Did he really say that, or are you saying he said it?" And I said, why would I say he said it?" And he said, "Because you're a cunt." And the whole crew went, and I just broke up laughing. It was the most serious thing I'd ever heard in my life. But when I got to him, he just pulled out a piece of paper from inside his pocket. There were 2 lines written on it, which was the solution to how to get you guys out from behind the wall, where there'd been dialogue. You said, "I'm going with you." And Rafter Man said, "Me too." And he said, "How do you like that?" And I said, "Great." And that was it. Yeah.
Stanley was a Jewish kid from the Bronx, and that's a British word that begins with a C and ends with a T. And he said that word with such ferocity and relish, and I was the recipient of being called a cunt for about a month. Because Stanley had a rule, a no bad ideas rule, that you could, you know, he said, if I suggest something and you don't like the idea of it, don't say that's stupid or that wouldn't work. Say, well, that's interesting. Let me think about it, or offer me an alternative idea. And I said, well, I love that idea. And and we worked that way till one day I broke the rule and said it thought it was stupid and we could reshoot something like we have the rest of the fucking movie. And I couldn't believe those words come out of my mouth, and I was trying to reach for them before they reached Stanley's ears and put them back in my mouth. And yeah, it was bad. He called me a cunt for about a month. My favorite direction from a director ever was from Stanley Kubrick, and it was very simply. Are there any directors in the room? You can use this one. You can. Stanley he would clear his throat and pull on his beard. That was kind of a Matthew. You're not going to do it that way, are you? It's my favorite direction because it's so specific. It's so specific.
Oh, but he did another one, which I always thought I'd love to use as a title for a movie, which is when Hartman was getting shot in the bathroom, right? And he came up to you, it's on film actually, and he said, I don't know what to do, Stanley. What do I do here? Because I'm standing here. And Stanley said, do something brilliant. What you just said, it was in the scene in Barry Lyndon, where the musical evening where I opened the door, he said exactly the same to me. He said, how are you going to come in? I said, well, I guess I'm just going to walk in. He said, you're not going to stand there like Frankenstein, are you? I said, no, I'm not.
Tell us about arriving on the porch late at night, having a fag and pissing off the porch.
Having a fag. That's not what you say here. Well, we used to talk a lot at the end of any day, and he had his offices and what have you, and the nearest bathroom was about 50 yards away. But we'd have a cigarette and we'd talk about the day, and then suddenly, I said, oh, I've got to go to the bathroom. He said, yeah, me too. And then we just stood there with a cigarette in one hand and our in the other, taking a long leak, as we say. And it was just one of those things where you just kind of stood around looking at the sky, counting the stars, because we were both doing the same thing. It was kind of remarkable.
I love that story because it humanizes him so much. He knew that my father was a drive-in movie theater manager, and I was born here in California, grew up in Utah. And he was fascinated with the West, and we were filming at Basingbourn Airfield, and it's tremendous tarmacs for the airplanes, the B-17s that took off from that airfield in the Second World War. And we were driving back to the location with the obstacle courses, and we were in a Jeep, an old U.S. Army Jeep, and suddenly Stanley just started making he turned the wheel, and we just started making loops, circles. And I looked at my phone, what the fuck's he doing? And he had a smile, like this shit-eating grin on his face, and he said, it must have been great being a cowboy, riding around, chasing cows. He looked at me and smiled, and I didn't want to say to him, it was probably a miserable job sitting in a saddle all day in the sun and everything. But in that moment, it was so beautiful, and Stanley's imagination about what it was to be a cowboy was so pure and beautiful. I didn't have the heart to tell him. And he said, well, I guess we should get back to work. Yeah, Stanley. We went back to work. That's it. Tony, if there was something that if there was somebody you could have interviewed for the film that you didn't get, who would that have been?
Stanley Kubrick.
Jack Nicholson?
No, I mean...
Shelley? Duvall?
They both can't remember anything, so... I mean, I don't mean it in a... No, I mean, I have to be honest, Ryan did it, you did.
Malcolm McDowell?
No, because he also didn't think Stanley directed him, so.
Wow. I would have loved to have seen Peter Sellers, you know, because he was such a profound part of his career.
But that was the point of the film, I think, is that Ryan and Matthew, they saw Leon. I mean, there were some people that I requested to film with, and they didn't want to do it. I mean, they didn't come out straight and say, I don't want to do it. They just, and I think it's a status thing. I think some of the actors don't want to come in and like talk about an assistant, but I think you guys had a bond and a friendship that, you know, it's the same thing with Ryan. Ryan saw Leon as he was a co-star with him on the film. So that was kind of tough for me in a sense, but that's the whole point of the film, you know. I mean, one of the most memorable things for me in this film was, it's not on the screen obviously, is when we went to LACMA, because I couldn't believe that we were standing in line and Leon Vitali was paying for himself. That was a little, you know, because that was intense for me to see, you know. I mean, you should have got in free at least.
Absolutely. Leon, is there anything in the documentary that you wish that you could have said that you can say to the audience now?
I don't know. I mean, I said so much in 2.5 years of filming. No.
Let me ask you then, what is an artist, and what is the value that art and film have?
For me, anyone can be an artist. In my vacation time from drama school, I used to work with a bricklayer. And if you actually saw the way he worked the bricks, and he really did, you know, he knew all the bonds, the Flemish bond, all of them. I mean, he was an artist at what he did, you know. And I've seen car mechanics who find their way around, because it's all a process of elimination. And I think artists work, you know, at a process of elimination, because the hardest thing, I think, to do is to get back to the simplicity of whatever it is you're trying to tell, the story you're trying to tell. And how often things come in which seem like good ideas, but they're big distractions, and so you're all the time working to get rid of the junk, however appealing it might seem at the time. So, you know, composers and musicians and actors and writers, and yeah, they're all artists because that's what they do. It's getting everything down to the simplest that you can make it to make the story resonate.